Hey guys, welcome back to World of Tanks. My name is Bruce and today I want to recommend the best tech trees in World of Tanks for free-to-play players. If you're interested in more reviews and gameplay, go to YouTube and search for World of Tanks with Bruce to get all of my videos, or click on the subscribe button. And now let's go. World of Tanks offers hundreds of different tanks and dozens of different tech trees for multiple nations. So you might ask yourself, which tech tree should I prefer? Which tech tree is worth playing and which tech tree is most convenient? In this video I will show you the best tech trees for each tank class. As every player has a different playstyle and different preferences, each recommendation is personal and subjective. I will give you my personal opinion right at the beginning. However, thereafter I will show you the best tech trees, not according to my personal preference, but according to the European server statistics. So it will be as objective as it can be. Make sure you stay until the end to see which tech trees truly are the best ones currently in World of Tanks. Now, one additional comment: in this video I'm not presenting, let's say, the best tier 10 tanks. Furthermore, I don't take personal preferences into account, so for example sniper guns, thick armor or mobile tanks. I simply show you the most convenient tech trees, the ones which offer mostly above average tanks, so that free-to-play players can enjoy the grind to the respective tier 10 vehicle. Alright, enough talking, let's start with my personal opinion. So, what is the best light tank tech tree? Well, in my opinion, the best light tank tech tree is the one which leads to the AMX 13105. All those French tracked light tanks have an autoloader gun, so offer a unique firepower. Their spotting ability is average, I would say. They are not the best spotters. However, those tanks offer a unique combination of, as I said, firepower, mobility, and then spotting ability. It starts with MX-12T on tier 6, most likely the best tier 6 tank overall in the game, if you ask me. And then the tier 7 is decent. The tier 8 is, I would say, average, in my opinion, just a little bit lackluster compared to the tier 6, tier 7, and then the tier 9 and tier 10 tank. The tier 9 is a decent light tank, maybe the best tier 9 light tank in the game. And then the AMX 13105 is also the best light tank, at least if you consider tracked light tanks. Obviously the oooBRUCeooo is superb, ultra strong in the hand of a very experienced player, but overall, not talking about super unicums, but let's say the average player, I would say the French tracked light tanks are the line to go, if you ask me. Now, what is the best medium tank tech tree? Well, if you ask me, I would go for the Swedish medium tanks. The tier 6 tank is ultra strong, a super precise gun, 15 degrees of gun depression, in my opinion one of the best, if not the best medium tank, tier for tier, no, not tier for tier, but on tier 6. The Leo is, in my opinion, an ultra strong medium tank. Now you have to play this tank with a small gun, because then you get a sniper tank which has an incredible mobility, good camo value, and so on and so forth. So overall a decent tank. And then the URAS 14.5 has good alpha damage, okay mobility, and is also a good spotter. The tier 9 tank is good for playing hull down, not the best DPM, but overall a very decent tank which you can use for playing aggressively. And then same applies for the URAS 15-16. So this line offers only above average tanks, and this is why I recommend this line for medium tank players. Talking about the best heavy tank tech tree line, I would go for the German tech tree line, which leads to the E100. It starts with the VK3601H on tier 6, and I made a dedicated video about this tank. In my opinion, yeah, one of the strongest tier 6 tanks overall in the game. You get an incredible amount of HP on tier 6. Then it leads to the Tiger 1, which is an above average tank, certainly after it got buffed. Now it is difficult to play because it doesn't offer any armor whatsoever. Then the Tiger 2, a superb tier 8 heavy tank, which you can really use for brawling. Good armor, obviously very slow, but a decent gun, very precise gun. All those tanks actually offer a relatively precise gun, an advantage certainly also for new players. The E75, certainly one of the best, if not the best, heavy tank in the game on tier 9 after it got buffed, and then the E100 also got buffed, so nowadays it is certainly competitive, although maybe not the best tier 10 heavy tank. But as you can see, all those tanks are relatively strong, and this is why I recommend this line as or for a heavy tank player. Now, talking about the best tank destroyer line, I would go for the Russian tank destroyer line, which leads to the object 2684. Those tanks, starting with the ZU-100 and then the ZU-100M1, ZU-101, those tanks have good gun, good alpha damage, good mobility, and the further you go, the better the armor profile is. So the object 263 offers a superb armor profile. Same applies for the object 2684. This tank, in my opinion, is still overpowered, but that's just my opinion. So I think those tank destroyers, are very competitive, and in my opinion this is the best tank destroyer line for you. Now obviously those are kind of classic tank destroyers which don't have a turret. So if you want to play tank destroyers which are more flexible, then I would actually go for the Italian tank destroyer lines. Yes, the tier 5 and tier 6 tank do not have rotatable turrets, but from tier 7 onwards, tier 8, tier 9 and tier 10, you get at least a turret traverse option of plus minus 30 degrees or even more. And those tank destroyers have a superb armor profile frontally, so you can really brawl with those tanks, at least if you are on your if you're not playing against higher tiers. Now the tier 9 tank is superb, not only on tier 9 but also on tier 10. And then the Minotauro has such a high frontal armor that you can really brawl against any other tank on the battlefield, maybe with the exception of tanks like, for example, the Jagdpanzer E100 with its premium penetration. And finally, the best arty tech tree for me is the one which leads to the American T92 HMC. Now, I do not play arty a lot, so I don't have much experience, but you know, every player which I was talking to about or considering arties said that this is overall the best arty line whatsoever, and so I highly recommend, if you're a new arty player or if you want to start playing arties, select this tech tree, because in my opinion it is the best one overall in the game. Now, having that said, this recommendation is my personal recommendation based on my subjective experience and obviously also on my personal preference. I'm a player which or who likes to play fast tanks that lack armor but that have a unique mobility, and I also like to play tanks with a good firepower, with precise guns. So I would always prefer a precise gun with lower alpha damage over a gun which has high alpha damage but which is not precise. Now, having that said, I'm not here to give you my personal preference, and so let me tell you how I can give you a recommendation which is not, once again, not based on my personal preference, but which is based on the European server statistics. And taking the European server statistics into consideration, I can give you a recommendation which fits for all players, basically for the average World of Tanks player. And so let me show you how I can do this. So in order to give you a subjective recommendation of the best tech trees in World of Tanks, I use the Tomato.gg website. On the Tomato.gg website, you can select the NA, the European and the Asian server statistics. So for my video, I am using the European server statistics. Then you can go to the tank stats, and now this webpage offers a unique feature, which is you can select between the last 3, 7, 14, 30 and 60 days. And I selected the last 60 days, and this gives me quite a huge benefit, because some tanks, you know, get buffed, some others get nerfed, and so only taking the last 60 days into our consideration, this gives us the objective view of the tanks as they are currently in the game. So for example, the tier 10 French heavy tank, the AMX M454, just got buffed a couple of months ago and is now one of the best, if not the best, tier 10 heavy tank. Now, before this buff, it actually used to be one of the worst tier 10 heavy tanks, and so it is extremely important to have the current data, the information on how the tanks currently perform. And this is what this website offers, why this website is insanely good for giving you an objective recommendation of the best tech trees in the game. And so for my recommendation, I simply select the regular tanks because I want to exclude all the premium tanks and the reward tanks. Then I select the respective tier. I only give you advice from tier 5 onwards up until tier 10. So let's, for example, select tier 9. Then I select the tank class. So in this case, for example, light tanks, and then I can see the WN8 of the last 60 days. And so this is not, you know, how I play those tanks. This is not how I like these tanks. This is the data based on the European server statistics. So this is the average, let's say, tank handling of the European player base. And so in this case, you can clearly see that the best light tank for the average World of Tanks player, at least on the European server, is the AMX 1390. Now, after I got a value for every tank, for every tech tree tank from tier 5 until tier 10, I then go to Tanks GG, because Tanks GG offers me a unique feature. On Tanks GG, I can see the total amount of XP which is needed in order to finally get the desired tier 10 tank. And obviously, the more XP you need, the worse it is for free-to-play player. As a free-to-play player, you want to have competitive tanks from tier 5 until tier 10, so the better those tanks perform, as I said, on average, for the average player in World of Tanks, the better it is. And obviously, the less the amount of total XP is you need in order to grind the tier 10 tank, the better it is. So I simply take this into my calculation. And so by doing all this, I get this lovely Excel chart, and I get all those values for each tech tree tank in the game. Now, there's one highlight I need to mention, and this is I have another factor which I am adding to this calculation. So as you can see here, I am calculating the value with multiplying it by a certain factor. So for example, for tier 5.8, for tier 6.9, and then so on and so forth. So for tier 9 it is 1.2, and then for tier 10 it is 1. Why am I doing this? Because we all know that playing a bad tier 5 tank is not as bad as playing a bad tier 9 tank, because of all the credits you need to upgrade your tank. So playing a stock tier 9 tank, which is simply lackluster, is a very bad experience for a free-to-play player, whereas playing a, let's say, lackluster tier 5 tank is okay if the rest of the tech tree is above average. And so in my opinion, it makes sense to kind of weight those values with this factor. And so this gives me the possibility to really make a calculation for the free-to-play player. So in other words, if this value, the average value, is good, then you can certainly be sure that not only do you have good tanks, but you have good tanks especially at the higher tiers, so from tier 7 onwards, especially at tier 8 and tier 9, and also on tier 10. And so this is why I make this calculation. So yeah, the rest is relatively simply. I simply take the value of the Tomato GG website for the respective tank on the respective tier. I multiply it by this factor, and then I basically multiply all those values, then divide it, and this is how I get the average value, which you can find here in this column. So this is the average value with, once again, this factor incorporated. In this column you can see the total XP you need in order to get the tier 10 tank, and then I simply divide the the average value by the total amount of XP. I multiply it by another factor simply to get a nice number, and then yeah, you can find the result of each tech tree. In this portion the medium tanks, and then down here heavy tanks, tank destroyers, light tanks, and then the artillery. And with this I can actually give you now a objective recommendation of the best tech trees in World of Tanks. Alright, so here are the best tech tree tanks for free-to-play players based on the European server statistics. Let's start with the light tanks. So the best light tank tech tree is, to my surprise, the one which leads to the Manticore, so the UK light tech tree line. And as you can see, this tech tree has the best results of all the tech trees in on the European server statistic. It is followed very closely by the French light tanks, which lead to the AMX 13105. This has also been my recommendation. And then actually the third best light tank tech tree is the Chinese one, which leads to the WZ 1321. The best medium tank tech tree is the one which leads to the Chinese 121 medium tank. As you can see, once again, to my surprise, and I haven't played this tank yet, but according to the European server statistics, this is the tech tree to go for free-to-play players. The second best is the German one, which leads to the E50M. And while I had some problems with the tier 7, the Panther, and as you can see, it is the Panther does not have the best value. It looks like the tier 6 is actually quite competitive, and so is the tier 9 tank. So once you hit tier 9 and tier 10, those tanks really shine, and I think this is why this tech tree is the best one, or the second best one I should say, for players who like to play medium tanks. Now the third best tech tree for medium tanks is the Polish one, which leads to the CS63, and as you can see, all those tanks perform great, starting from tier 5. Actually the tier 5 is let's say average compared to the other tiers, but then you get decent values for the tier 6 tank, the tier 7 tank, the tier 8 tank, the tier 9, and finally the tier 10 tank. And so yeah, I think this consistency is what makes this tech tree so great. So if you're new to the game, go for the Chinese medium tanks, go for the German medium tanks, and then also go for the Polish medium tanks. Now, one word of caution, obviously the Chinese medium tanks, they do not offer much gun depression, so take this into consideration. If you want to play on ridge lines, if you want to use this to your advantage, then yeah, this is a word of caution. But other than that, it looks like those tech trees are very consistent and they simply perform great, so I would recommend those tech trees for free-to-play players. The best heavy tank tech trees are, first of all, the one which leads to the French AMX M454, and right now this is no surprise for me because those tanks got buffed, and so the tier 10 is one of the strongest, if not the strongest tier 10 heavy tank nowadays in the game. The tier 9 tank is also superb, and those two tanks are just so much better compared to most of the other heavy tanks in the game. And the tier 8 tank is yeah, is all right, I would say, average, but the tier 7 tank is also relatively strong. The tier 6 tank is strong, and so is the tier 5 tank, so no surprise why this tech tree is the best one according to the European server statistics. Now the second best tank tree, to my surprise, is the one which leads to the T110E5, but actually this tech tree also got buffed, and so it is now much more consistent. It offers a good tier 5, tier 6 tank. The tier 7 tank, in my opinion, is also relatively strong because it is a hull down monster. So is the tier 8 tank. The tier 9 tank also got buffed, so it also features now a good value on the European server statistic, and looks like the tier 10 tank, the T110E5, is also a very decent tank with a good value. So overall, yeah, this tank is also a recommendation for you players out there. Now, the second place is won by actually the French tech tree, which leads to the AMX50B. And I have to be fair, I would not have expected this, but it looks like those tanks with their unique autoloader mechanics offer a great firepower for good players. But word of caution, first of all, the third place is relatively close, and I should mention that the Chinese tech tree got a value of 17.66 compared to the 17.87 of the French tech tree. And so if you are not familiar with autoloaders, simply go for the Chinese tech tree, which leads to the WZ1115 Alpha. You might also consider the tech tree which leads to the E100, because it also features a good value of 17.47. And then you can also go to the Polish 6CTP, because once again this is also a good tech tree. But yeah, this is the European server statistic, and let's now take a look at the best tank destroyers. So what is the best tank destroyer tech tree in World of Tanks? To my surprise, it is the one which leads to the T110E3. It looks like the player base is able to use the armor profile of those tanks. And now while the tier 5 till, let's say, tier 7 tank have not so much armor, actually, the tier 8 tank starts to get, let's say, significant armor. The tier 9, the Doom Turtle, the T95 has superb armor, and so has the T110E3. So looks like this is the best tank destroyer tech tree according to the European server statistics. Now the second best is the one which I also recommended, which is the Russian tank destroyer tech tree, which leads to the object 2684. This tech tree is strong. Not so strong is the tier 5 tank, but then the more you get up the tech tree, the better it gets, and the best value is obviously the one of the tier 10 Russian tank destroyer. The third best tech tree, once again to my surprise, is the other American tech tree tank, which leads to the T110E4. And I think the player base just simply likes the fact that those tank destroyers offer a rotatable turret, and as you can see, the value of the tier 5 and tier 6 tank are exceptionally strong, so you might actually want to consider to remain on tier 6 at least until you have gathered somewhat experience in World of Tanks, and then you can proceed through the a bit weaker tier 7 and tier 8 tanks, and then enjoy the tier 9 and the tier 10 tank. And finally, the best RT tech tree in the game, to my surprise, once again, is the British artillery, which leads to the Conqueror tier 10 artillery. Now, as you can see, the tier 5 seems to be relatively strong, and then the rest is also above average, at least compared to the rest of the arties in World of Tanks. The second best artillery tech tree is the one which leads to the German GW on E100, so the German tier 10 artillery, and that is once again to my surprise, but that's just how it is according to the European server statistic. And then basically the rest is super close, but the best value according to the European server statistic, with 9.70 compared to 9.69 and 9.66, so as you can see it is relatively close, is the one which leads to the French Badchat 155.58. Take it for what it's worth. I think the values of the artillery tech trees are relatively close, at least compared to the other tank classes in the game. So yeah, if you purely want to rely on the European server statistic, then once again go for the British, the German or the French artillery, but you might want to take my consideration into your account. But yeah, overall those are the best tech trees in World of Tanks. Once again, not according to my subjective view, but according to the European server statistics. And finally, for all of you out there who want to see the full chart, here it is. Now, first of all, as you can see, it is as of 15th December 2022. So basically all the World of Tanks holiday ops shenanigans is not incorporated into this calculation, which is good in my opinion, because once again I wanted to give you the objective view of the best tech trees for you out there in World of Tanks. And yeah, so once again, this is the full list. You can check out every value once again based on Tomato GG, the website, which is great to see all the result. So yeah, please feel free to discuss with me in the comment section whether this surprised you as well as it did me. Maybe there is an explanation behind one or another result, and I think I will make another video about this, discussing this. I did not play all those tech trees yet, but it kind of makes sense, especially if you incorporate or if you think of that a tech tree which is consistent is better, at least for the average player, because the average player can then adjust to the style or to the game play of a specific tech tree much better than, for example, a tech tree which has lots of different tanks. And so yeah, maybe this is one explanation, but feel free to discuss it in the comment section down below. Alright guys, that was it for today with the best tech trees for free-to-play players in World of Tanks. What do you think about this topic? Do you agree with my list? Feel free to leave a comment in the comment section down below to tell me your opinion and whether you disagree with what I presented. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. If you hated it, give it a thumbs down. Consider subscribing to my channel, and I see you next time in another World of Tanks video.